Jake woke before the sun because cold always woke him first, and because his knee stiffened if he slept too long, and because Emma, his little daughter, sometimes whimpered in her sleep when the wind pressed through the ribs of the bridge like a giant breathing. He rubbed her back through the thin blanket, felt the tiny jump of her breath settle, and told himself the same quiet line he told every morning: hold on until daylight, then solve one thing at a time. He was an elderly white man with a careful way of moving, the kind of careful that comes from years of lifting only what you must and saying only what helps. He had learned that after the factory closed and the landlord raised the rent and the heater died, and the manager said, "It's an old building, Jake," and shrugged. Before the bridge, there had been a small second-floor unit with a crooked hallway, a wind-up clock that chimed late, and a photo on the fridge of a boy with a scar over his right eyebrow, smiling so wide the sky looked larger around him. Jake did not speak the boy's name anymore because Marlene, his wife, had told him years ago in a tight voice that the boy was dead, that there was a car fire and no body to view, that ashes had been scattered and there was no grave, that asking made everything worse. He had believed her, or he had tried to, because work and time and the late gift of Emma had filled his hands, and because grief is a heavy coat you cannot carry and work at the same time. When the plant shut, Jake stood in a line at the county office under flickering lights, handed in resumes that showed a whole life of punctual shifts and safe hands, and listened to a young clerk say there were training lists and wait lists. He took a part-time job pushing carts outside a grocery. Then another stocking night shelves until his knees swelled. Then nothing at all, except odd jobs that paid in coffee and thanks. Marlene's voice hardened at the same speed the money ran thin. She kept the mailbox key on a small chain under her blouse and took every call before he could answer. And when he asked about the bills, she said costs were higher, and not to worry, she had handled it. When he said he might call the boy's old number just to hear the recording, she said, "Don't open that door," and shut the conversation like a drawer. Winter came early the year they slipped, and one morning the red notice sat on the door above the chipped peephole. Jake sold the clock and a clean dresser for cash, gave Emma the last of the warm milk with a smile he practiced in the bathroom mirror, and told Marlene he would ask his brother for a loan. She stared past him to somewhere he could not see and said, "Do what you want, but do not bring the past here." The past felt like a locked room with his own name on it. The last week inside, he carried Emma up and down the stairs for warmth because the heater only clicked and hummed and then went quiet. He warmed her socks with his hands, watched steam rise off his breath like a small prayer, and told himself a plan would show up if he kept moving. The day they left, the manager would not meet his eyes. He stood in the stairwell with a folded stroller, a duffel bag with 2 blankets, a pot, 3 spoons, and the photo from the fridge tucked in his shirt pocket because he could not throw that away, even if he never looked at it in front of Marlene. They tried a church basement and a crowded shelter where a man at a desk said there was a list and children went first, and could he wait until Tuesday? Tuesday was 4 nights away, which was the same as forever when the air bit your ears even in the afternoon. Under the overpass by the river, a woman named Clarice pointed him to a dry patch, told him which soup line moved fastest, and showed him how to tie the blue tarp low so the wind would run over it. She gave Emma a wool hat with a pom-pom and said, "Big world, baby girl," and Emma clapped and said, "Hat," and the word sounded like a blessing. Jake built a small camp from the tarp and an old pallet and taught himself the new rules. Boil water, even if it looks clean. Keep your shoes inside the bag or they walk away on their own. And never sleep at the same time if you can help it. At night, he told Emma stories in simple beats so she would drift. He told her about a golden retriever that learned to open a gate with its nose, and about a lemonade stand that made no money because a boy drank the stock, and about a bicycle tire patched in a dishpan full of water where the hole showed itself by the line of bubbles. Sometimes when he said boy, his voice thinned and he had to cough to clear it, and he would press his palm to his shirt pocket like that could calm the ache, and then he would keep going. He did not let himself wonder who had the ashes or where the car had burned or why there had never been a funeral program he held in his own hands. He kept his mind on small work. Dry socks, a second blanket, a cardboard box under the sleeping pad to lift the cold off Emma's bones. One morning, he went to the clinic for Emma's cough, and a nurse with quick eyes said, "She needs warm, not just medicine." And he nodded because he knew, and because there were things he could not change with nods. The sky emptied itself into rain for 3 days like one long pour. Water found the seams of the tarp, crept along the pallet slats, and cooled them from the feet up. He set a pot under the drips and thought how many drops make a full weight, how many small cuts make a wound that will not close. He wrapped his coat around Emma and sang a low song he barely remembered from his own father's porch about trains and far places. The song made his chest hurt and also helped. In the worst hour of the third night, when even the cars above seemed to move slower because the rain had turned the highway into a river of hiss, Jake heard the new sound. Tires easing to a stop on gravel, doors closing softly, voices that did not belong to the bridge. He lifted on one elbow, put his free hand out to shield Emma's face from any light, and watched a tall man with an umbrella step down from a long, low car. The umbrella was black and held the rain back in a clean circle, and the man walked in a way that said he was used to dry rooms and schedules that obeyed him. The driver stayed by the car and waited with his hands folded. The tall man came close, lowered the umbrella to cover Emma first, and then knelt slowly, like he knew old knees by heart. Up close, the light from the car's headlamps crossed his face and drew a thin white line over his right eyebrow. The kind of line a fence makes when a laughing child misjudges a jump. Jake knew that scar before his mind said the word for it. Every rule he had trained into himself tore like wet paper. Do not look for what you cannot have. Do not ask where the dead have gone. And the mystery he had sealed because Marlene said to leave it alone rose up and stood breathing in front of him. The man said, "Dad," in a calm voice that did not match the storm, and time split like wood under a good swing. Jake's mouth went dry and his heart kicked hard once, a single hammer stroke inside his chest. And all he could say in that first stunned second, with the rain hanging off the umbrella, and Emma's hat crooked and the photo warm against his ribs, was the line he had been given long ago and forced himself to live with. "My wife said you were dead." Jake did not move at first. The word "dad" hung in the wet air like a bell still ringing, and he stared at the man kneeling with the umbrella, at the thin white scar over the right eyebrow, at the steady eyes that did not flinch, and he said in a flat, tired voice, "If you are Ethan, tell me the name of the dog that learned the gate." The man answered without pause, "Milo, the golden retriever who pushed the latch with his nose." And then he added, "You fixed my bike tube in a dishpan and showed me the trail of bubbles, and you yelled when I drank all the lemonade at the stand and then laughed 5 minutes later." And Jake felt his mouth open and close because those were not big facts anyone could look up. They were the small nails that hold a life together. "My wife said you were dead," Jake said again, softer, as if testing the strength of that old sentence, and the man nodded like he had expected that weight. "She told me you did not want me," he said. "She told you I was gone. We will sort out the words later. For now, please let me get Emma warm." Emma coughed, a thin, wet sound, and held out both hands toward the umbrella because she liked the whisper it made against the rain. The driver came closer then, careful and quiet, holding a thick blanket that smelled like clean soap and dry rooms. "I'm Luis," he said, eyes on Emma, not on the camp or the mess, as if the only job tonight was the child. Jake swallowed, tucked the photo in his shirt pocket deeper, and said, "Emma first," to no one in particular, as if the rule had to be said to stay real. Ethan shifted the umbrella to cover her and slid the blanket around her shoulders in a single sure motion learned from practice. And that single motion told Jake something else. This man was used to fixing problems fast. "Where did you come from?" Jake asked while they stood and the rain pressed hard. "How did you find me?" Ethan kept his voice low. "A volunteer posted about the camp after the storm," he said. "There was a picture in the background. I knew your hands. I sent Luis to check, then I came." He did not say more. He did not look proud or angry. He looked focused, like a man who had a list and was on step 1. They crossed the mud to the car. It was long and low and dark, with doors that thudded soft, not sharp. Luis opened the back, and there, already latched, sat a child's safety seat with a small folded towel and a toy clipped to the strap, a plain bear with a stitched smile. Jake stopped. He had not seen a seat like that in years. He had not seen anyone plan for him in longer. Ethan watched his face and said, "I was hoping," and left it there. They settled Emma, and she went quiet at once, knees tucked under the blanket, fingers on the bear, eyes big as she looked at the small light in the ceiling. Jake slid in next to her, feeling the heat move around his legs from vents he could not see. The seat felt firm and clean, and when the door closed, the rain became a soft hiss far away. "Where are we going?" he asked. "Home," Ethan said simply. "For now. A doctor will meet us there." The word home pulled at Jake from two sides, past and hope, and he did not fight it. He only put his palm on Emma's shin under the blanket to feel the warmth rise. The car eased away. The bridge faded behind them. They passed the river, black with the storm, past the gas station where Jake had once warmed his hands over coffee he did not buy, past the block with the broken neon sign that flickered Hot L because the E had died. And Jake watched each thing like it was a door he had chosen to leave shut. Ethan sat facing him, not in a thrown way, more like a son who had learned to take a certain seat because it let him watch and help. "You look strong," he said. Jake snorted once. "Strong enough," he said. "Old enough," he added, because the truth wears better than pride. Emma dozed, the cough fading to a soft click in her throat. Luis drove like rain was information, not a threat, hands at 10 and 2, eyes steady. At a light, Ethan took a small case from the seat beside him, opened it, and pulled out a clean sweatshirt and thick socks sealed in plastic. "For later," he said. "And there's water if you want it now." Jake took the bottle, turned the cap slow, and waited for his hands to stop shaking. The water tasted like nothing, which is another way to say it tasted like safety. "I need to know one thing," Jake said, voice still low. "Are you angry with me?" Ethan looked down, then back up. "I was," he said. "Years ago. Then I learned how stories get bent. Tonight I am not angry. I am here." The light changed. The car turned under tall palms, and then along a wall of stone, where a gate slid open after a small flash of green somewhere out there in the rain. The driveway curved like it had been drawn with a quiet hand. Lights came on in sequence, not showy, just enough to make the path clear. The house at the end was big and pale, with a red tile roof washed darker by the storm, and the windows threw easy light like clean kitchen lamps on good mornings. Jake felt the old reflex to stand back, to say, "We should not be here." But Emma coughed again, and the reflex died because there is a rule more important than pride: keep the child warm. Luis parked under an awning where the rain could not touch them. A woman met them at the side door. She wore plain clothes and a lanyard and the kind of calm that makes other people breathe slower. "I'm Carla," she said. "I'm a nurse. May I listen to Emma?" Jake nodded at once. Inside, the air was warm and dry, not from a blast, but from a steady system that did its job without showing off. Someone took the wet blanket and gave Jake a towel and a simple gray hoodie that fit almost right. They sat Emma on a soft ottoman near a lamp. Carla listened with a small stethoscope, counting under her breath. "Upper airway," she said. "No wheeze low down. Fever is mild. She needs rest, warm air, fluids, and this," and she held up a small nebulizer already humming. "She can play with the mask if she likes." Ethan crouched by Emma and breathed through the mask first to show it was no trick. Emma copied him, because children copy what they trust. After 5 minutes, the rattling eased. Her face relaxed. Carla smiled and said, "Good girl." A man in a white shirt stepped in with a bag and said, "I'm Dr. Patel, on call." And he checked the same things, nodded at Carla's notes, and left a short list taped to the fridge. "No pneumonia," he said to Jake, "but no cold nights for a bit." And Jake said, "We can do that," and meant it without knowing where we ended and this house began. Ethan led Jake down a hall to a guest room that looked like a page from a catalog but smelled like ordinary laundry and lemon soap, not like a stage. There was a crib set up by the window. Not fancy, just solid, with a new sheet stretched tight and a small quilt folded at the foot. "I did not know your size," Ethan said, pointing to a dresser with folded clothes. "So we guessed. We can change things tomorrow." He said, We the same way Jake had, like a simple tool they could both use. Jake stood there too long, feeling the steady air on his face, the way his knee did not catch, the way the dark outside stayed outside. He put the photo from his pocket on the nightstand face down, not to hide it, but to save it for later when his hands were steady. "How many rooms is this?" he asked, not for envy, only to understand the space he had to navigate. "Enough," Ethan said with a small smile. "Too many, maybe. Far fewer than the people we can help fill them if we choose right." He did not say the word millionaire, but the house said it for him without bragging. The quiet art, the real wood, the simple lines. "There is soup," Luis called gently from the doorway, as if he had timed it to a clock only he could hear. "And tea." They ate in a bright kitchen at a table that could seat 8. Tonight it held 3, 4, if you counted the bear clipped to the nebulizer, which Emma had not let go. The soup was chicken and rice, with carrots cut small. The tea was strong. The spoon was warm in Jake's hand. He took one bite, then another, and realized he had been bracing his shoulders for months and could set them down now. After, Carla showed him how to lay Emma on her side with a rolled towel behind her back so the cough would drain better. Emma slept at once, cheeks pink, breath even. Jake stood and watched her for a long minute. Then he turned to Ethan. "We will talk," he said. "I want the truth in order, but thank you for tonight." Ethan nodded once. "Morning," he said, and then the truth. And for the first time in years, Jake believed morning would come and bring something other than cold. Jake woke to the smell of coffee and the soft scrape of a curtain ring as morning light slid across the guest room. And for a few seconds he did not know where he was. Then he saw the crib, the folded quilt, Emma's small hand on the edge of the mattress, and the quiet air that meant the night had kept its promise. And he remembered the car, the house, and the word "Dad," said in a voice he still heard in his chest. He washed his face in warm water that came fast and clear, put on the gray hoodie from the dresser, and lifted Emma, who blinked and smiled like the room itself felt safe. In the kitchen, a plate of toast and eggs steamed next to a bowl of berries, and Carla showed him the little machine again for a short morning treatment, and the cough sounded looser than last night, which made him breathe easier. Ethan waited until they had eaten, then asked if they could walk a bit. Nothing formal, just a look around, so the house would feel less like a stranger. They went slow past a hallway of pictures that did not look staged. A child with wet hair after a pool jump, a dog asleep with one ear inside out, a birthday candle bent from heat, a backyard table messy with plates and laughing faces. Jake felt a tug when he saw a photo of a boy, not a boy anymore, maybe in his 30s, with that same thin scar over his eyebrow, standing on a beach with wind in his hair. He did not touch the frame, but he stood there long enough for Ethan to notice, and Ethan said, "Soft." That was a hard year that turned out right, and did not add more, which Jake liked. In a small office with a window that looked to orange trees, Ethan set a leather folder on the desk and asked if Emma could go with Carla to look at books. Jake nodded because he wanted Emma near Smiles while he listened to the hard things. Ethan opened the folder and took out papers in tidy stacks with clips, copies of envelopes with his old address in Jake's own careful block letters, each stamped "Undeliverable, forwarding order expired," a list of wire transfers sent to a savings account that was supposed to be Jake's, then moved to another account 1 week later, a copy of a postal change of address form filed years ago in Marlene's full name with a P.O. box that was not theirs. Phone logs that showed a number Ethan had tried for months was set to block unknown callers, and 3 short typed notes from a banker, a neighbor, and a school coach, each dated and signed. Ethan did not rush. He slid the first sheet forward and said, "I started looking the year I turned 21. I sent letters to you at the apartment. They came back. I sent them again the next year. Same thing." And he tapped the red stamps with a finger that did not shake. He slid the second stack and said, "I sent small amounts on holidays to see if you would use them. The bank says they went in and then out to a linked card in Marlene's name." And he turned one page to show dates that sat on Christmas and Father's Day like pins. Jake felt a tight line pull inside him, not only anger, not only shock, but the awful click of pieces fitting where he had not wanted a puzzle. Ethan went on, simple and steady. "This is the change of address. It moved your mail to her P.O. box after your knee surgery. The neighbor said she noticed your slot stayed empty except for flyers. The banker said she came in often and liked to help you with forms. The coach said she called him once when I asked for your number and told him to tell me to stop stirring up the past because you were fragile. He did not say lie. He did not have to. He put down one more sheet, a refinance document, signed on a date that matched the hospital wristband Jake now remembered wearing, the notary seal neat, the witness line blank. Did you sign this on purpose? Ethan asked, not as an attack, but as a check. Jake traced his eyes across his own name, messy and long, and shook his head once, slow. I thought those were the insurance papers, he said, and the room seemed to tilt and then level. Ethan took a breath and said the part that had lived like a stone between them for years. She told me you did not want me. She said you had a baby and a new life, and I needed to move on. She told you I died. She said it was a fire on the interstate and there was no body to view, and a friend took the ashes, so there was no service to attend. He let the words sit. He opened a shallow box and showed a folded notice that looked like an obituary, but had no funeral home listed, only a date and a line about private arrangements. He laid it next to a printout from the state record that had no death that matched Ethan's name or age that year. Jake stared at both and felt memory shift. The day Marlene had cried with the blinds closed and would not let him turn on the TV. The way she had held the mailbox key under her blouse. The way she had taken every call and said, I will handle it, as if his questions were small stones she could brush from a sill. He did not speak for a long minute. He kept his hands folded and his gaze steady on the papers until the fog in his head thinned. She built a room made of paper and put us inside, he said quietly. Ethan nodded. I cannot change what she did, he said. She is gone. I do not want to hurt you by dragging it all out, but I want the truth to be clean so we do not trip over it later. He slid one last photo across the desk, a picture Jake himself had taken long ago of Ethan at 12, grinning through a smear of dirt, a soccer ball under his arm, summer sky behind him. I kept this in my wallet for years, Ethan said. I looked at it every time I thought I should stop trying. Jake put his finger on the crease he remembered making when he tucked the picture into a cheap frame in that old kitchen, and he finally lifted his eyes to his son's face. I am sorry I did not break that room sooner, he said. I should have asked harder. I was tired and I picked the smaller pane. Ethan shook his head, slow. We were both told a story, he said. We are here now. He closed the folder, not to hide things, but because the facts had done their job. He asked if Jake wanted air. They stepped outside to the patio where the pool lay flat like a polished stone and the orange trees held small green fruit that would be sweet in months if watched and watered. Jake stood with his hands on the back of a chair and looked at the sky that was light but not hot yet. What do we do next? He asked, and it felt good to make a simple future question after years of no good choices. Ethan answered in order. We get Emma fully well. We make sure you have your own accounts and papers. We talk to the bank so no one can move anything without you. We do not rush the rest. He did not say forgive, because that word takes time. He did not say forget, because that word is not true. He said, we go step by step, and the plan fitted Jake's hands like a tool he already knew how to hold. Emma came out then with a book about fish and a cracker in her fist, and she climbed into Jake's lap and said, read, in a bossy little voice, and he sat, and Ethan sat, and the three of them turned pages while the house was quiet, and the mystery that had lived like a shadow in Jake's life began to turn into plain facts he could fold and put away. That afternoon, after Emma napped, and the house had the quiet sound of machines doing their work well, Ethan asked Jake if he felt up to a short drive because there was one more place they needed to check if they wanted the truth to sit straight. Jake agreed because it was easier to breathe with facts than with holes. So Luis pulled the car around and they rode 10 minutes to a low row of storage units behind a fence. The kind of place that looks the same in every town, with doors painted the same dull blue and numbers that have seen sun for years. Ethan had a key on a ring with a tag that read Wharf 312, and he said he got it from a safe deposit box the bank had closed after fees piled up. And that box had been in Marlene's name, and the key fit the lock on Unit 24 as if all of this had been waiting for their hands. The door rolled up and dust stirred, then settled, and inside were 4 bankers' boxes neatly labeled in Marlene's tight hand. Taxes, medical, house, personal, and 1 small plastic bin with a hospital bracelet looped over its handle. They did not rush. They lifted the first lid and found the quiet items that build a paper life. Tax returns, bank slips, envelopes slit clean, notes that said renew car tags or call Cheryl. In medical, they found the wristband's twin and discharge papers with a name. Jake did not know. Leila Moreno, dated 3 years ago, and a second page titled Temporary Caregiver Authorization that listed Marlene as guardian for infant female for 90 days because the mother had post-surgery complications, with a nurse's stamp and a signature where the father's line sat blank. Jake's hands went still on that page, and Ethan let him read every line before he pointed to the stamp and to a note at the bottom that said, family contacted per Marlene Whitlow. And then he opened personal, and there were 3 sealed letters addressed in a younger hand to Jake and Dad, with no stamps, tucked under a rubber band, and 2 photos. One of a young woman with dark hair holding a baby, the other of the same baby propped in a hospital cot beside a small whiteboard that read, Emma. Jake traced the baby's cheek in the photo the way he had done 100 times in real life, and then said the woman's name aloud because saying a name makes a person more real. Leila, and the sound of it changed the air. Ethan kept the order simple. He closed the boxes he did not need, took the discharge sheets and the caregiver form and the photo, and they drove back, all 3 quiet in a way that was not cold, just careful, like carrying water in a full glass. At the house, Carla had Coco waiting for Emma and slid a plate of crackers to her without making a big show. And Dr. Patel stopped by again to check the cough and smiled at the change in Emma's color. And then Ethan asked Jake if they could talk in the office one more time, because he had the final piece and wanted to place it gently. He set a slim white envelope on the desk and said he had sent in cheek swabs the night before. 1 from Emma's used toothbrush, 1 from Jake, 1 from himself, because the questions about Emma were too important to guess at. He asked if it was all right to open the envelope, and Jake said yes without looking away, because hard truth is easier straight. Ethan slid out a single page with 3 needs that even a tired mind could read. And he said the lab confirmed what the hospital papers suggested. Emma was not Jake's biological child, and the markers showed a first-degree relationship between Ethan and Emma. He stopped talking then, to give room for the fact to land. Jake did not shout or shake. He closed his eyes for 1 long breath, as if stepping from one dock to another. And when he opened them, he did not move his hand from the photo of baby Emma, because love does not leave when a line on a chart moves. He asked 1 question, where is Lila now? And Ethan's answer was simple. She died 2 weeks after that discharge, a clot after surgery, the kind that hides and then takes everything in a minute. And he put down a copy of a death certificate with a date that matched the small black band on the corner of the photo. Jake sat back then, and the room felt larger and also more focused, like a lens had found its right distance. Ethan went on because there were 2 more facts they needed to hold. After Lila died, Marlene extended the caregiver form by filing for kinship placement without a court hearing, using a fast-track rule the county allowed for immediate family, and she wrote that Emma's father was unknown and unreachable, which kept any call from reaching Ethan. And then, in the same week, she filed the mail forward that had cut off the letters, and the lie about the car fire had done the rest. She told me Emma was our late miracle, Jake said. The words dull, because they had been worn smooth by years of belief, and now they fell apart like old thread. He looked at the chart again, then at Ethan, then at the doorway where Emma was giggling with Carla at a line of stickers she was peeling and sticking to her sleeve, and he said, "She is still my child," in a voice that had steel in it and a tremor too. And Ethan nodded instantly, as if he had been waiting to answer that 1 point above all others. "Yes. I am her father by blood, but you are her dad by the hours you carried her and the nights you kept her warm. I am not here to take her from you. I am here to set the record straight so no one can use lies to hurt her again." The next steps were simple and human. They called a lawyer who came that evening with a yellow legal pad and a way of talking that did not make a person feel small. And he said they would file to correct the county's record, name Ethan as biological father and Jake as legal guardian, and then build a shared plan that put Emma first. They called the county clerk to ask how to amend the caregiver file and learned that fast-track forms can be fixed with court orders when all parties agree. They spoke to a social worker who had a soft, firm way of saying what matters is safe, stable, and loved, and she scheduled a short home visit for the following week. They did not argue about titles because the words dad and grandpa would sort themselves when Emma was ready, and until then, they decided to let Emma call each of them what felt right. After the calls, when the sun slid low and turned the pool gold, Jake stood by the glass and let the simple picture come into focus. His wife had built a wall of lies so precise it had kept a father from a son and a child from the right names, and she had used a baby as a lock to hold a tired man in place. It shattered his picture of her, but it did not erase the mornings when they ate toast in a cramped kitchen, or the afternoons when she ironed his shirts while humming without words. He could hold both truths, the harm and the ordinary, without pretending one canceled the other. He told Ethan so, and Ethan said that sounded like the honest kind of forgiveness that takes time and does not lie about damage. Later, after Emma fell asleep on the sofa with a sticker stuck to her cheek and the nebulizer cat whispering on the table, Ethan brought out the 3 letters from the storage unit and asked Jake if he wanted to open them. Jake nodded and smoothed the first, which turned out to be from Ethan at 21, full of hope and unsure lines, telling him about his first apartment and a job that barely paid but felt like a start. The second was shorter, written on a holiday because the date said December 24th, telling Jake that he still loved him no matter what story he had heard. The third was just a photo of a dog asleep with one ear inside out, Milo, and a scrap of paper that said, "I still laugh like this." And Jake read them all and put them back in their envelopes and said, "Now they are where they belong." And he set them on the mantel in the bright kitchen, not to display a wound, but to mark a road they had at last walked together. When the house was finally quiet, and the machines hummed, and the orange trees outside held their small green fruit, Jake looked at his son and said, "Tomorrow, we tell Emma that families can have 2 truths. The one you are born with, and the one you make every day." And Ethan said, "We will tell her simple and honest. And then we will take her to the park." And the plan, like every good plan Jake ever trusted, came in small steps he could hold. The next morning came soft and clear, and Jake kept his promise to use simple words. He sat on the rug with Emma and her stickers and told her a true, small story she could hold. Families can have 2 kinds of love, the kind you are born with and the kind you make every day. And she had both because she had a daddy named Ethan who helped make her and a papa named Jake who held her when nights were cold. Emma tried the names out like new shoes, tapped each with a finger, and settled on them without fuss. Daddy Ethan, when she tugged his sleeve, Papa Jake, when she leaned on his shoulder, then asked if the park had ducks and slides. After breakfast they went, because good news sits better when it is followed by sunshine and a swing. And Jake watched Ethan push Emma in slow arcs while his knee warmed in the light and the last threads of the old lie loosened and drifted away. In the afternoon, the social worker came for the home visit and saw the crib with its clean sheet, the nebulizer with fresh filters, the drawer where the medicines lived in tidy rows, and the schedule taped to the fridge with times circled in a thick pen, and she asked questions in a voice that did not turn people small. Who reads to Emma? Who cooks? Who will watch her when a meeting runs late? And she noted the answers and the easy way Emma moved between them, as if this had always been the shape of her house. 2 days later, they sat in a small courtroom with pale wood and a ceiling fan that hummed, and a judge with clear eyes read the DNA report and the caregiver forms and the letters from the banker and the neighbor. And she looked over her glasses at Jake and Ethan, and then at Emma, who was trying very hard to sit still with a sticker on each knee, and she said the record would be corrected. Ethan listed as biological father, Jake as legal guardian with decision rights. shared care in the same home, and all prior, unknown and unreachable entries struck. Her gavel touched the block, a small sound that still felt big, and the clerk slid papers across the table with a red stamp that meant the future would not trip over the past again. They walked out into sun that seemed brighter than the hour, and Jake felt taller, not because of pride, but because the weight that had bent him for years had finally been named and put down. The next week, they did quiet chores that matter more than speeches. At the bank, they closed the old P.O. box alias and set alerts on every account with his own phone and a second number for Ethan in case sickness ever made him slow. At the storage unit, they boxed what mattered into 2 containers. Emma's birth photo, the 3 letters that had come home at last, the caregiver papers marked void. And they loaded the rest for donation, leaving the unit empty in the late light with a sweep of dust like a stage cleared after a long, untrue play. They found a short notice through the hospital chaplain about Lila's burial in a small plot shared by the church, and one quiet morning they drove there with a single white flower and a small windmill toy Emma had chosen, and they stood in a clean square of grass with a plain stone and said her name aloud so it would not be lost. And Emma planted the windmill and clapped when it spun. And Jake thought how love survives even when plans do not. That evening, because holding both truths was the only honest way forward, Jake wrote a page about Marlene that did not lie about harm and did not erase their ordinary mornings either. He wrote that she built a wall of paper and kept a son from his father and a child from her right names. And he also wrote that once she ironed his shirts while humming without words, and that they ate toast side by side when money was thin. And he burned the page in a small fire bowl under the orange trees and watched the ash rise, telling himself that forgiveness is not a key you turn, but a path you walk one day at a time. Life after that did not turn into a parade. It turned into a good list. Emma's cough cleared, and she learned to blow bubbles in the pool and kick to the second step. Jake's mornings began with coffee he could make without counting the spoons. And in the afternoons, he started a simple workshop in Ethan's warehouse where he repaired donated chairs and tuned old bikes for families who needed both. His hands remembering the feel of honest tools and the small joy when a wheel spins true. Ethan, who had once said the house had too many rooms, turned 2 of them into short-stay spaces for parents with little kids between housing, and Jake helped set up the shelves with linens and a drawer labeled New Socks. Because new socks make a person feel human faster than any speech. And once a week, they drove back to the bridge with blankets and meal cards, and a card with a phone number that actually answered, not to point and preach, but to hand and listen. On a Saturday, they sat at a long table in the bright kitchen with paper spread out, Emma's drawing of a very round duck, a list from the lawyer with dates for a final review, a flyer for a family clinic, and they made a plan for school forms and checkups and a small vacation when the court stamped the last page. Not to show off, but to mark a line crossed. And they chose a park with tall pines and a lake where you can rent a boat by the hour and pretend time moves slower. Sometimes, the mystery still pressed at the edges. Jake would wake at night and feel that old cold panic stir, or Ethan would go quiet when a certain song came on the radio, and they learned to say it aloud without shame. That was the room made of paper, one of them would say, and the other would nod, and the panic would ease because the room had a door now, and both of them held the key. One evening, with the day cooling and the pool a square of dark glass, Emma fell asleep on the couch with her cheek on a book about fish and the nebulizer silent on the table. And Jake stepped out to the balcony where Ethan was leaning on the rail looking at the last thin red line of sun. They did not speak at first because some days deserve quiet. Then Jake said, "I used to think the night under the bridge was the end." And Ethan answered, "It was a bend," the same word he had used before, steady as a hand at your back. And they stood there until the first star showed and the house hummed its gentle hum. Before bed, Jake checked the locks, a habit from old apartments. And then he returned to the crib and tucked the quilt at Emma's sides the way Carla had taught him. And he felt the old vow he used to whisper in the thin, dark change its shape. It was no longer hold on until daylight. It was build daylight, one small, honest piece at a time. When he lay down, he did not count exits in his head like he used to. He counted rooms they could fill, and chairs he could fix, and names that had been set straight. In the morning, he would make pancakes, the small, round ones Emma liked, and Ethan would burn the first batch and laugh, and they would drive to the park with ducks and slides. And Emma would shout for both of them, "Daddy Ethan, push!" "Papa Jake, look!" And both names would fit, clean and true. Because the secret had been brought into daylight and turned into facts, and the facts had been turned into care.